I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and this is The Radical Center, a recording project I began in 2022 as a way to describe and discuss the social and ideological currents that are rapidly altering our culture. In a time when political polarization seems to be the norm, I'm seeking to understand rather than react. I'm grateful to all the thoughtful men and women who share their stories and insights with me in this conversation series. If you would like to contribute to this project financially, there are links in the description. Thank you, and thank you all for listening and being part of this exploration. Today I'm speaking with Maurice Kaehler. And Maurice, you are a recent graduate from a CMHC program, and we've spoken about your experience a little bit, but I am eager to learn more and hear about how it went for you in the school where you were and kind of what your thoughts are on counselor training, the process that you went through, and what you liked, what you didn't like, whether it matches up with my own experience and some of the worst case experiences we're hearing. And feel free to say as much or as little about the school, the specific school that you went to. You don't have to name it if you don't want to, but you're welcome to. And maybe we should start by just me asking you what got you interested in working as a counselor in the first place.
Well, I've been doing, I would say that I've been doing healing work since the early 90s. I began doing yoga in the late 80s as a means to heal from severe brain trauma. And so I got into yoga, and then I found that I had a predisposition to doing healing work on very deep levels. So I basically channeled that into being a yoga teacher, and for many, many years. And like I said, it was something that was natural to me. And then, life happens, and I went through, had different turns in the journey. And then about 5 years ago, I thought, it's like, okay, you're in your late 50s. It would be wise for you to do something that you could settle into, but at the same time incorporate all your experience and everything that you know in. So that's what led for me to think about becoming a therapist. I knew it was important for me to get a degree, for me to get a master's in it, if only for the fact that I would be incorporating other tools from other modalities. So it was important for me to get the degree, namely because it would give me some sort of validation if I choose to not go for certification. Okay. So essentially that's what got me into, that's what made me want to become a therapist and actually go through the graduate program. I worked with, proud to say that I have a good therapist, and I obviously would discuss this with him. So he kind of prepped me in which direction to go. I first looked at social work, and one of the things that he said, it's like, you have to be careful going that route, because what his experience was working with other people, you'll lose your empathy in the work environment after you get your degree. I think a lot of it was because of the fact that the bureaucratic structure that surrounds a lot of it will be very, very draining. And he was blunt. He essentially said that, because you're going to be a man, that's going to affect how people are going to treat you. Because he essentially said, it's pretty much a woman-dominated environment. And he implied that's actually a dangerous place to be in these healing worlds, in these, I want to say empathetic driven worlds. So he said, I actually think it would be best for you. And I agreed with him. I think the best route for you is to actually become a therapist. And again, he prepped me for that. He essentially said, you being a white male, you're going to get attacked in these programs. just for being who you are. You're going to be attacked. So just know that in advance. So again, with that in mind, I kind of before I applied and went to the program, I went into a preventative mode. For me, it's like I need to do a certain therapy in order to deal with this environment, and I need to have good backup, which my therapist and my friends would provide. So essentially, that was the lead in as to why I wanted to become a therapist and what I needed to prepare myself for in advance.
Well, there are several things that you said there. One, just when you said settle into a career, you wanted to find a career that you could settle into. I like that about the counseling field because it is a way, it's one of these careers where people actually become more valuable as they
Mm-hmm.
get older because they've accrued some life
Mm-hmm.
experience that it's not just the education that they're drawing from in order to be a resource for the people that they're helping. It's also their own life experience. And it is something that you can do as an older person for many years to come and still be a resource to your clients. And so I liked the phrase you used when you said settle into a career.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of other things that stood out to me and then a question for you. One, his observation, your therapist's observation about social work and the kind of loss of empathy due to the
Mm-hmm.
bureaucratic structure. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really well put, and I think that that's it. It's great that someone's talking about that and recognizing it. And I don't think we're talking about that enough.
Mm-hmm.
The impact of bureaucratic and technocratic systems on human empathy and what that does when you try to apply something like social work or counseling in a bureaucratic system.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
that's interesting, and it's kind of like just a sidebar because I think unless there's more that you want to go into about that later, I just liked that observation. I think it merits further discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And then the the suggestion that he had that as a white male going into this kind of a program, you will be attacked, and just how I want to retain the ability to be shocked by that because it's shocking that anybody would have to gird their loins for battle, going into a helping profession. Like you're going
Mm-hmm.
into an applied psychology program. Why should it be known and normal that you have to prepare to be attacked for your identity when you go
Yeah.
into that? And yet that's where we are. And so he's right. And I wonder what he's right from my perspective or from my perception and what I know about this. I wonder how your experience bore that out. But it's also shocking that we're in a place where that's a normal thing. And just one question for you. When you said certification, you wanted to go through the program for validation and for education, even if you didn't go for certification. Did you mean that you were thinking, even when you entered the program, that you might not want to become a licensed therapist, that you just might want the education in your background?
Yeah. That's pretty much what it was.
Okay.
Like I said, I mean, one thing I mentioned before that, literally I have these predispositions, and it's like for me, it's important to use my hands. I've had experiences, honest experiences where I have the ability to lay on hands.
Mm.
And for me, what I found over time, the more that you have whatever you want to call these gifts, I'd rather say predispositions. If you bury these, it actually becomes painful
Mm.
if you don't utilize these processes that you have. So in the state of California, if I want to become a therapist, obviously there's no such thing as bodily touch. When for me, I think that's actually can be the most important part of a therapy practice.
And how would that work in the context of a therapeutic practice when you're thinking about laying on hands or physical touch?
Well, I think what I've come to so far is that as of now, I need to keep that separate from me being a therapist.
Okay.
It's like, okay, if you come to me, there's four things that we can do: traditional therapy, mentorship, and hands-on healing work. So how I see it right now is one wouldn't overlap on the other. And
Mm-hmm.
the good thing about the reality of touch is either I touch or I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So therapy will be therapy, and
Mm-hmm.
with that line is the fact that therapy is going to be therapy. It's not going to be about touch. Over here, hands-on healing work, it's like it can it's got to be hands-on.
Okay.
I think there definitely needs to be a definite line between the two,
Mm-hmm.
but that is going to be in my shingle. And
Okay.
what I learn in a graduate program, of course, is experience, and it's going to be utilized over here.
Mm.
It's might be a little, still a little vague,
Well,
but
you're trying to sort out the boundaries between these
exactly,
modalities. Sounds
exactly.
like hands-on healing when you're talking about it. I'm thinking of like craniosacral or visceral manipulation work.
Um, I that would be a part of it, but that's not what I would
Okay.
do. I may
Okay.
learn that in the future, but right now it's
Mhm.
basically traditional old school hands-on healing work.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's really interesting. And so when you went into this program, you were prepared by your counselor and by, you said you had your resources, your counselor, your friends that were there to sort of listen to you and support you. But what did you expect from the program, and was it what you expected?
I expected a response for me being a white male. I didn't realize, um, again, just because it's an easy term to use, I didn't realize the woke aspect of it.
Mhm.
Initially, I would say, I would say that I leaned left. I do have a farmer's conservative mentality, but I do lean left. So in the beginning, I was willing to go along with everything. And so I wasn't prepared for essentially the therapy world of postmodernism. And then I was quickly after that first quarter I was uh, already saying something about this isn't right on a
Mm.
bigger scale. It's not just about me being a white male. Something's not right about this on a larger scale. And like I said, I really didn't know what it was, but I remember my second quarter, I was in a class and one of the instructors asked us, what are you getting out of the program so far? And for me, I said, it's like, I'm learning how to find the line between what is true learning and what's bullshit. Because I was already sensing the fact that something's not right here and I don't trust what I'm hearing. Anyway, I'm
Mhm.
going back to what you were saying about going into it in a preventative crouch.
Mhm.
Even at that moment, there's a bifurcation. And I didn't realize it back then, but so I'm not going to be fully, it's if I'm not, if I, well, what I learned over time was to be more and more careful. But in the beginning, there's already a split. So, and that in those environments, that's not healthy.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
going to invite mental health issues. It's going to invite physical health issues, which is what I found out over time.
Okay, so that split that you were talking about, is that the split between what is true learning
Yeah,
and what's bullshit? And
yeah,
so you were going in already sort of scanning for that. Like that's I have to be aware of that. And so kind of guarding yourself in that way. And
yeah, yeah. In a way, like I said,
okay.
I was well guarded. I would say I was well guarded in responding to me being a white male,
Okay.
but with
But
everything else,
yeah.
I wasn't.
Okay.
I
Well,
wasn't at all.
do you remember some of the first observations that you started to what the first things that you started to become aware of that made you think that doesn't sound right, or I'm not sure that's that's correct. Or
Yeah, yeah. I would say the first one that stood out the most was in the first quarter, we're asked to take a society and an individual class.
Mhm.
And it is basically, it lays out theories of ableism, anti-racism, um, uh, diversity, equity,
Mhm.
all of those issues. And I start, and I'm fully on board with all of this. I'm fully on board. So we study anti-racism in one course, and already I'm thinking it's like, okay, well, in my family, in my farm family, of course, Hispanics worked for us. There were Hispanic farmers. My sister dated a black man. But it's like, but the policies, because they're Republican conservative, the policies that say they support are racism, are racist. So it's like, oh, in spite of my family's history, are they racist also? So already I began to start slanting in that direction and questioning them. Um, Around the eighth class of the quarter in that class. First, to back up a little bit, she made a big thing about creating safe spaces for everybody,
Okay.
and don't take up the space if you're a speaker talking online. Just basically making the safest space as safe as possible. It's like, okay, I get that. I'm on board with that. And then, the night before the eighth class, the eighth week, she sends us a message saying we're going to watch a documentary tomorrow on racism and white men. And it's like, make sure, your computer's ready, blah, 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 all of that stuff. She doesn't tell what the video is. She doesn't tell what the documentary that we're going to watch. She literally says nothing about what is going to be discussed. And so class starts, she lays it out, what documentary we're going to watch. And she starts to show the video. Now, I kind of have an idea of what the video is. It's about men getting together in Northern California, different ethnicities, and they're talking about their experiences of racism. There's white men in the room. They start sharing their experiences of racism. And I know that's what the documentary is about. I also think, okay, I was in Los Angeles in the early 90s. I kind of know that men's groups like this were happening. So I'm not going to watch it. I'm just going to turn the sound down. Okay. So I have no idea what the dialogue is, what they're talking about, anything. So the documentary is over. I turn up the volume, and there's a discussion, and then all of a sudden the first attack comes. And there was 20, because I remember I counted after the fact. There were 20 students in the room, 18 were female, 2 were male. And all of a sudden, the key light turns on the both of us. And we're accused of taking up space when we're asked to talk, in class. All of a sudden, we're accused of taking up space. And I'm going, where is this coming from? This is completely out of the blue. And so, we're essentially asked to share our side of it, what our feelings are. And I basically say, it's like, and I said this, it's like, that's bullshit. It's like, I know who I am in this room. I know that in a class environment, I say very, very little. So what you're accusing me of is completely off base. Um, and then the other man that was in the class, he really got jumped on because he did have a tendency to, uh, in my mind, speak more than me, but he also spoke eloquently.
Mm.
And he also measured what he said, so he would be understood clearly. So it wasn't a dominating thing that he was doing at all. So I felt that it was very, very unfair to him. And it's over. and the class ends, and afterwards I'm just really, really knocked sideways. And I really start looking at this class, and it's like, and I could, it, I really started looking at class, and then I realized it's like, there's tools of manipulation going on here, whether they're aware of it or not, whether the teacher is aware of it or not. But I realized that a lot of it is embedded in the language that's being used. I not only heard this from the teacher, but I also heard this from some of the students in the class who already had a background. Um, um, you know, what comes to mind right now, who already have a background in woke theology. And so the next day, I actually started doing research on the satanic panic movements of the late 80s and early 90s, and specifically on one of the co-authors of the book Courage to Heal, which was a book that really didn't promote it, but basically said, believe everything that's said by a woman who has been either says that she has been raped, or accuses other groups, men, women who contribute to it, because it was what it was. It was a panic. People were falsely accused. Families were destroyed. Uh, um, it was a nightmare for a lot of people. So I basically started just doing research. Who were the authors? What were they like? What life did they have after being a part of this? And I think at the time, I think I pretty much knew it was a fight back response, as opposed to what I experienced the day before. So I basically started aligning one with the other.
Hmm.
Um, and um, and my thing is, I mean, I'm a strong, healthy man, but that weekend I basically had my first anxiety attack. I didn't know where it came from. I had no idea what it actually was. I just know that something's not right here, and I need to go to ER. And I went there, and they basically said, this is what we think it is. These are the things that you can take.
Hmm.
But um, because of that, I really started looking the classes from that perspective. If I don't engage with the teacher in a strong way, I'm going to pull back a little bit and see where the weaknesses are in the class. Um, and so I was in and out of that for the rest of the program, which again is another bifurcation. And
Hmm.
it's hard to come back to a grounded place
Mhm.
when you're doing that, because in these classes, at least for me, in these classes, I'm so on guard. And then stepping out of it, it's like, you've got to come back to reality. And that's not an easy thing to do when you're in those environments,
Mhm. Well,
especially on the defensive.
that that scene that you just described of being in this class and watching this documentary and then having the pile-on that ensued,
Yeah.
it sounds like a social psychology experiment.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you are, like this whole thing is you. It sounds like something out of communist China. This
Yeah.
let's groom people with this training video and then watch them play out the thing that they just watched, that they were incited to in
Yeah.
this video. And so that's really shocking
Yeah.
that that is allowed to happen in a class, that
Yeah.
would be allowed, that these students are encouraged to turn on one another in this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
way that you felt afterwards, I mean, it's no wonder it's really hard to experience that kind of social. It's not exactly ostracism, but you're being pinned on the wall for
Yeah.
everybody else to castigate. And so the way that you felt after that, it's no wonder you went through a lot
Yeah.
emotionally.
Yeah. the thing I want to say to that is one, it was so obvious that turn.
Mm,
For me, it was so obvious, like, wow, this is what can happen in a situation like this. I mean, I'm prepared for it, but it's like I'm actually seeing it happen. And the other thing I thought of at that moment, it's like, especially when you're entering into these programs, I would say for so many of the students, especially those who are younger without experience, it's for the first time you're being asked to turn inward
mm,
and to look at yourself and and I think in the act initially there's a bifurcation to that. So if you do that, also at the same time you become extremely, extremely vulnerable because you're kind of letting go of the structure that you've been raised in
mm,
and being asked to question it, and then being so already there's an openness and the vulnerability, and then you're watching a documentary as such, and the dominant for lack of a better word, the dominant emotion in the room is female. So I recently heard the term, a term called emotional contagion. And, that for me, that's an actual example of that happening. And and especially recently, the thing about balance male to female, whatnot, it's very, very general. But I think just the presence in that room of a man or of men or of males actually keeps the possibility of contagion in check.
mm.
I think it actually
Interesting.
keeps the possibility in check.
That's interesting. I Gosh, what you're describing, I am thinking about my program that I was in. So I began in 2019. Was yours 2020, 2021,
2022.
22? And was it all online or was it in
We were
person?
just Yeah, we were just coming out of COVID.
Uh,
So I would say 50% of the classes were online and 50% were in person. This
mhm.
class was online, which I actually think made it even worse.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering about.
Yeah.
In So in the program that I went into, there were a lot of mixed messages about what our attitude as students was to be to this process. When we went in for a pre, I guess, pre-matriculation in orientation course, the everybody who spoke talked about how this was going to be like 3 years of therapy.
Mhm.
You're going to open yourself up. It's going to be like you have to really invest yourself in this. It's like therapy. It's like we're all doing therapy, 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 therapy. So we were told that quite a lot to kind of come in and bring all of yourself and be ready to be super open and have that orientation toward we were told you're going to be sharing very deeply and hearing a lot of things, and it's just this is we're kind of like reaching into your guts and spilling it all onto the table. And then there was this safe space language that we got, like, we can't make this a safe space. This isn't a safe space. We wish we could make this a safe space, but it's not a safe space. So you have to make it safer. So it was this kind of like the onus is on the students to guard and gatekeep and safetyify everything. And I when I had a particular issue in it sounds like it's probably the same course or a version of the same course. Yours is called Society and the Individual, and mine was called Multicultural Perspectives. But it's the
Yeah.
course in which we got a lot of this kind of jargon and language around social justice and oppression and whatnot. When I objected to certain elements of this, I was told that my professor was not my counselor. She was not my therapist, and so this was not therapy, and that I was being inappropriate by making any objections to these things. That it was so there was a lot of mixed messaging around
Mhm.
that. And when you're talking about the bifurcation, like the looking in and the changing in orientation as you're entering the program, and then for yourself, the guardedness and the trying to suss out what here is legitimate learning that I should be absorbing and open to and taking in, and what should I be sort of prepared for and steeled against. I'm wondering about that kind of, what was the messaging that the program was trying to give you about your attitude and the expectation? And I guess I asked that because it's, if you are in a program that's supposed to be quasi-therapeutic and we're all supposed to be bringing everything to the table, and then you allow and encourage students to struggle session each other
Mm-hmm.
in class, it just seems so horribly cruel and unethical
Mm-hmm.
to be promoting this kind of stuff. So I don't know. I don't know if I articulated what I was asking very well, but
No, a lot of you, or is what of what you're saying is true. Um, I mean, to be blunt, I've been in Los Angeles, I've been in the Hollywood area for years, so it's pretty much I know the games of manipulation.
mm-hmm.
Okay, I always joke around. It's like you're not a true Los Angelino if you haven't been in at least one cult and have had one really, really, really bad therapist.
Huh.
So it's kind of like when you get here, you're Dorothy in the land of Oz. And the longer that you stay here, you realize what goes on behind the scenes.
Mm.
Okay. So, um, so I, in speaking to what you just said, I started to do this in this class. So it's very, very easy for someone to say, this is your projection, especially in a therapeutic learning environment, especially in a therapeutic world. So I'm having all of these, what I realized were these healthy instinctual responses, essentially saying it's like what that teacher is saying is wrong. I don't like what she's saying right now. I don't like what he's saying right now. To the point where it's like, I don't like how this person is presenting themselves just by how they look
Mm.
and what they're wearing and what freedom that they're actually giving the students. And initially it's like, that's your problem. That's a projection. You need to deal with that. You need to deal with that. You need to deal with that. But then at some point, I just gave myself the leeway to say, wait a minute, maybe it's not my projection. Maybe what I'm saying right now, what my instinct is real, no matter how extreme it may seem to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the next thing that comes to mind, and I think it's like what you're saying, we're being told these things, and then it's like, and when you're in it, you have to deal with it on your own, um, or um, or um, or put it out onto your own therapist. And it's just like, well, that's just an organization or a person getting you into your shit, but not being able or not wanting to be able to get you out. So there's a lack of responsibility. There's a lack of responsibility. There's a lack of leadership. Um, and I think that's what a lot of this program is about. And I'm sure by the third quarter, I realized they're putting out a lot of, it would be kind for me to say robots, but also a lot of bad therapists out there.
Mm-hmm.
And when that hit, that was just so sad.
Mm.
It's just so, so sad for me at that time.
Mm-hmm.
It was devastating for, like it doesn't matter how long it felt. It was just devastating to hit that wall. And, and with these realization comes more vigilance,
Mm-hmm.
and that vigilance shouldn't be there in a learning environment. One, I'm paying to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not paying to share. I'm not paying to hear everybody else's experiments. I'm not paying to have 20 minutes of the class be true learning and then the rest of the class being, okay, what's come up for you?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I'm paying for. That's not what I'm here for. So,
Yeah, you're describing pretty poor level of instructional quality when
yeah.
you're talking about that. And you had, I mean, this class, this experience in the society and the individual course, that's it. It sounds horrible, and it also sounds like it opened your perspective to some of the other woke stuff that was coming through, some of the social justice teaching. You kind of started to, you said you'd been right along with it up to a point, but then what was the connection that you were making there, and how did you go on to perceive that as you went through the program? What was your sort of break with the acceptance of the social justice culture that was being pushed?
Um, I think the major break was probably about, I would say, a little over a year in, and it was actually the trauma course.
Okay.
It was actually the trauma class, the trauma course, which, to be fair, I knew it was going to have some issues with that. Um, and looking back, what I was saying right now, it's actually I really, really like the teacher. And I feel scared to say this. She was a black teacher. She laid out her cred, all of her cred before the class, liberationist, blah, 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 all of that stuff. And 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 I realized, I mean, I had such strong visceral reaction in that class after um, um, watching a documentary, and like again, there was just this strong visceral reaction to it, where I felt like I can't finish this class. I knew that I had to, so I was going to. But there's just what I would say now, just these feeling paralyzed. And then some of the other documentary were shown were supposedly about healing from trauma. But again, I've lived in Hollywood a long time, and it's like, this documentary is of a famous person who allows a documentary crew to come in. And a part of me going, it's like, yeah, this is great. This is wonderful. I'm seeing you emote. I'm seeing you react. But also, you're Hollywood. It's like you're in the public realm. And it's kind of like, well-meaning, but it's like, this is also about you. It's not about everybody else. So we watched the video, and, the teacher, she comes in, and I'm sure she feels this, but she's also, she's wiping away the tears.
Mm.
And it's kind of like, you're not being a teacher here. You're not being a teacher. And I remember after that class, I came up with the term in my mind, redemption porn. This is an example of redemption porn,
Mm.
where it's so emotional, and it's so emotional, and so much about someone in their healing process. And it's also something that everybody can watch. So all of a sudden, this is like a car wreck.
Mm.
In a way, this is no different than being in a car wreck. And everybody feels, and everybody emotes, and everybody has their tears, and everybody shares. But it's like, okay, this has nothing to do with your education.
Sounds like a tent revival.
In a way, yeah.
What was the documentary what was it about? The one that when you watched it, you felt like, I don't think I can get through this class.
Yeah, it was about two young black women who I think it was in Baltimore, because I remember we wrote the paper about Baltimore,
Mm.
and two black girls who were heavily abused, who actually I know one murdered somebody when she was 13. I think both did.
Okay.
And it was of their healing process. What it was, the documentary filmmaker spent 3 years with them.
Okay.
So they were in prison. They were let out because of their young age. It showed them going through therapy and how they were dealing with the world outside of once they were released and in the real world. I can't remember the name of it, but that's essentially what it was about.
Okay. And so what was it about it that it was emphasizing that made you feel like you weren't sure you could get through it, that there was something being heaped on? Was it something about the racial themes or oppression lines or something like that?
Um, Give me a moment to think about that.
Hmm.
The first thing that comes to mind, and I think this goes back to the thing about being a white male. Um, I think that um, sorry, taking a lot of time.
No, that's okay. It's okay. Take your time.
I want to say I think that that forced questioning of yourself,
Hmm.
um, 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 the forced questioning of yourself, the fact that racism is played, the issue of racism and anti-racism is played so strongly.
Hmm.
And what's implicit in that is that you're white, you're male, you're part of the patriarchy. You contribute to it. You contribute to it just by being alive.
Hmm.
And I want to say it's just that key. It's I think that's implicit in a lot of how this information is being presented. I want to say now, if I saw that video outside of the context of what that class, obviously I would have had a different experience to it.
Hmm. Hmm.
I like what you say about it being a tent revival,
Hmm.
because I did feel at times that the teacher was actually uh, playing, uh, was like a reverend in a house of
Hmm.
worship.
Hmm.
I felt that was being played also.
She was
I
whipping
was
people
aware.
up
Yeah,
emotionally.
definitely, because I
Hmm.
thought that at the time.
Hmm.
I've never been to a Baptist church, but it's kind of like, oh, this is. I see. That said, I've been a yoga teacher, so I know what
Hmm.
modulation of voice does. I know the power that's behind that when you speak, how you speak it, the
Hmm.
power that you find in realizing that a modulation of your voice, what that can do to a class, how
Hmm.
that can turn a class in a different direction in a heartbeat.
Hmm.
So yes, in that class, I noticed that that was being played at times.
Hmm. And it sounds like in that video about these two Black women or girls who'd gone through what they'd gone through in their story, the thing that was being, it was kind of like they were piling on this implicit suggestion that trauma is the domain of certain people
Yeah,
and that other people, their feelings just don't matter.
yeah,
So we're gonna show you trauma, but we're gonna only show you trauma through the lens of selected oppression group members.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So that was kind of your reaction because it had been just poured on so thick during this program.
yeah.
It's almost, that's really interesting because it almost has a, what's the, there's a phrase for it. I'm forgetting, but it's like a hostile attribution bias sort of thing where if you keep on being told that these are the people who are special and protected and people like you, no, you're a bad guy. You don't get to feel that way. After a while, you start to resent those kinds of people, whether they've had anything to do with that or not. So it's one of the harms, I think, of a lot of
Yeah.
this really racist anti-racism rhetoric is that it builds resentment between groups. That's not, it's based on the training itself. It's not based on interaction between groups necessarily. You're actually creating more racial tension
Yeah.
then you're addressing.
Yeah. And Leslie, what I was going to say actually right before you said that, it's like, can
Mhm.
you see how it's very, very easy to become more cynical
Yeah.
and more self-loathing because of that, because of going through all of that process.
Mhm. It's
Um, yeah.
something you said about your, I think you said it was your third semester or quarter or something in the program when you realized, I think this program is churning out a lot of bad therapists. What was that? What led you to that realization? What was it that you saw or that you started to understand that made that such a powerful realization for you?
I think it was just the overall experience of getting to that point. Um, I think a lot of it is also my own personal experience. Um, um, working as, um, touching somebody, there's an honesty to that.
Hmm.
There's just a straight on honesty to that. We all have our ideas of what touch means and what touch can be and how it can be violated. Uh, and what I want to say next is, the truth that comes with that is there's no margin for bullshit. And I think this is where I want to go. Again, being raised in a farm environment, it's like you are in service to, the winds, the sun, the weather, whether you have water, whether you don't, whether the crops will be in. I was raised on a dairy farm, so it's like you have to milk the cows twice a day, 365 days a year. So, and then I had an experience with my partner who eventually passed away from cancer. Where in that experience it became very, very clear because of her upcoming death. There's no margin for bullshit. There can't be,
Hmm.
especially if there's love. If there's love, that is the original anchor. There's no margin for bullshit because there's a fragility to life. There
Hmm.
was a fragility to her life. And then when I take it out to the larger picture, it's like, there's the truth. There is the fragility to us being on this planet.
Hmm.
And I think the thing that, and what I saw at that time, that's what I was saying. It's like they're putting out a lot of bad therapists
Hmm.
because with what I just said, I kind of thought, oh, the therapy that's the therapy that's being put out right now is a therapy of deficit.
Hmm.
And I can't define that well right now.
That's really an interesting phrase.
It's a therapy of deficit. And I think pretty much everything that I said up to that point is the opposite of that.
Hmm.
And I think I want to basic say, the love of life.
Hmm.
The therapy that's being put out is a it's at the heart of it, it's a dismissal of life in a strange way. This might be too philosophical right now.
I don't think it is. I think that's perfect. I think that really sums up something very well. I mean, when you're talking about the the straightforwardness and honesty of touch, and then the straightforwardness and honesty of impending death, like facing mortality and facing the elements in that farm environment, the things that you can't deny them, they just are, and there are things that you must do, and there are things that you must accept in that kind of environment. Then you go into this sort of program and you're learning about helping people through uh, through layers and layers of manipulation and deceit. And you're talking about this therapy of deficit, and I'm thinking about how this kind of perspective, telling therapists that they need to be activists for social change and that they need to have these kinds of demographic categories in their minds for who's marginalized and who's privileged and what we're supposed to think about men and what we're supposed to think about women and white people and black people and all of this stuff. It's like cutting holes in people. It's like when you said deficit, I'm thinking about the holes that it carves out of the people that it's supposed to be serving.
Yeah. Yeah, you say that, and now I'm thinking about the fires, the
Mm,
fires that have recently happened.
mhm,
And it's like, uh, whatever, that world of theory, that world of activism, it's like, when something as dominant and as straightforward as, fires not only taking away homes, but also uh, monuments, no matter how little or how big they are,
mhm,
monuments of meaning, let's say that.
mhm,
Um, this world over here um, is so far removed from the truth of this, the truth and the loss of this, whatever, the truth and the loss.
mhm.
Um, anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's well said. And so you had this realization, I don't think I think this school is actually putting out a lot of bad therapists.
yeah,
What was your experience of your peers in the program? Were there people who seemed like they had they were well grounded and reasonable, and you thought, I think this person gets it and can transcend some of this stuff? Or was it all activists? Like, what did you think?
yeah. I saw some teachers who I think they were playing the game that they needed to play,
Hmm.
but I also heard them say things were popping out that showed them they were aware of the bigger picture.
Hmm.
Um, the only students that um, I mean, yeah, the only students that I felt comfortable around.
Hmm.
Uh, to be honest, you were strong, physically strong men.
Hmm.
Um, everybody else, with everybody else, I mean, I was always on guard with,
Hmm.
to the point where I became either I came into it this way or I got this way, to the point where I was too good at it.
At
You
guarding
know,
yourself?
yeah, I was too good. What I'm saying is, if somebody would say something, uh, I remember I said something that, again, talking about the farm and talking about women's rights. It's like, well, I remember when the ERA movement was going on in the 70s. And there was one thing, I mean, I had a very contentious relationship with my mom, but one thing that she said always stuck with me because it was solid.
Hmm.
And she said, if women want equal rights, they should come work on a farm.
Hmm.
And I always remember that. And I actually brought that up in a conversation. And again, there was another turnaround. And I was surprised at how quick, I parried it away
Hmm.
and how diplomatically I parried it away.
Oh, so you developed a way of doing that, not being
Yeah.
defensive, but rather like sleight of hand almost. You were able
Well,
to
I would still say
dodge
that
the power
yeah.
struggle.
Let's
Yeah.
put it this way. I was good at the defensiveness.
Okay. Okay.
That's what
Okay.
I'm saying. I was
Yeah.
good I could really, really defend myself well against that. But
Mm.
again, that there shouldn't be that shouldn't be needed in a learning environment. That shouldn't be required in a learning environment.
Hmm. Hmm. That you have to be on guard for that much
You have to be
hostility.
on guard all the time.
Hmm. Instead of just a discussion of ideas,
As a
being able
discussion
to
of
share.
ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're done and you survived the program.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And what now?
Um, well, now it's about finding my way, um, and what I'm willing to do and what I'm not willing to do. The California program says that, we need 3,000 hours of training. And it's just like, I'm 62 years old. I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what that does is it takes me out of the certification process,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously, I mean, I mentioned before I wasn't going to be a part of that anyway. But this only proves the point even more. And I guess relative to what you just said, it's kind of like I have to find my own way. I have to find my own platform to work from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is about rest. It is about, decompressing from all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, kind of, what I would say, getting my spirit back. What I'm noticing now is there seems to be a lot of finding my voice in the middle of this all,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually nice. I've been writing some, for me, some really good pieces relative to what's going on, with the fires here and the after effects. Um, but right now, it's, work the work that I'm working right now that I enjoy doing, and finding my own way and using my own imagination and my own um, I think finding my own way. And the thing that I want to say is really, really being aware of the capacity that I have, the competency I have. That's really coming out strong of that program.
Mm-hmm.
The realization, to be blunt, first off, most of the students there are young. I'm 62 years old, so of course I have experience there. And it's like, I can ride herd on them for being young and dumb. But they also have a life in front of them. But I think for me, it's like, are the structures of learning competent or not? And I found that in most of these classes in that environment, I felt that I had to keep becoming ignorant in order to keep going. I had to dumb myself down in order to keep going. So I think this is important. Coming out of that, the realization, it's like, wait a minute, I do have incredible competency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, I do have incredible competency, and I came out of an environment that made me aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely what I'm going to take forward, because that's in that world of, okay, yeah, no margin for bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that, yeah, answers your question.
It does. When you said that you kind of have to take time to rest and kind of, I don't think you said recuperate, but that's kind of the word that my mind put on it from
Yeah.
this process. One of the things that I, I I think we so desperately need alternative training programs for students, because I think that this process is really detrimental to the individuals that go through it. I
Hmm.
think that either you're going through it and you're getting programmed with the way that they want you to behave with as a therapist. And as you already, you kind of addressed that a little bit, they're churning out lots of bad therapists, and we're seeing that. But if you don't go through the programming, and instead you're somebody who resists this and feels uncomfortable with it, and wrestles with your own conscience as you go through these trainings, I think that it's incredibly hard for people to be in that position. I think that it's an assault on your intuition
Yeah.
when you are being told by authorities who they claim a great deal of authority in being, I mean, most of your professors are psychologists or doctoral level um, psychology professionals of some stripe. And they tell you that you're, like you said, that you're wrong, I'm right. And so it teaches people to really question themselves. It puts you in that loop of self-checking that you do when you're being gaslit by someone. And finding your own voice in that, or finding an anchor in truth in all of that, is incredibly difficult, and holding on to that and then continuing through a program that forces you to give lip service to things that you don't believe in. I just think that it's an incredible struggle for anybody
Yeah.
to go through. And I think putting anybody through 3 years of that, and it takes a toll on a person, and
Yeah.
it's really not what we want to be doing to the people that we want helping other people to be resilient and be a strong social resource for your average person. This is not
Yeah.
the training that we should be putting therapists through.
No, no. No, you're saying that, and I'm thinking, what did get me through? First off, this therapist was great. He says you're going
Mm-hmm.
to come out of this stronger.
Mm-hmm.
He says he's a good philosopher too. You're going to come out with your own Weltanschauung, which is like basically you're going to come out stronger than when you went in,
Mm-hmm.
and you're also going to come out of what you're going to really know what you don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it was nice to be reminded about that every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had other friends said, it's like, this is just your Jedi training. So the
That's a good
being,
perspective. That's a
yeah, it's a
strength-based
great, and it's
perspective.
great because either you're a victim to this
Yeah.
or, you're becoming a Jedi warrior. And it was nice to
Yeah.
keep reminding myself about this because in that environment, it's easy to become the victim.
Yeah, it is.
It's easy to feel a victim to all of this. So
Yeah.
it was a lot of, holding the line,
Mm-hmm.
hold the line, hold the line. There's this great line from the war film, The Longest Day, and the line is hold until relieved, hold
Mm-hmm.
until relieved. And the man kept, the leader of the group that was holding the bridge, he kept saying this to himself. He just kept hold until relieved. I need to be strong. I need to lead. Also, we're always on the edge of disaster here, but I just need to hold until relieved.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love that perspective. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing this experience
Yeah.
with me, and thank you for being willing to talk about what that was like. And what resources would you recommend to people who are in that? Do you have any ideas of what would you tell somebody who's thinking about going into this field or who is currently this in a program like the one that you're describing?
Well, two things that I found myself doing instinctually was about halfway through, I began to do martial arts. For the very, very end, I took up boxing
Mm,
to finally get through it. So I would definitely say a very, very strong, grounded physical practice.
okay.
Um, uh, and it's that basic thing, breathe and move, keep breathing and moving, and definitely have people, behind you who understand who you are and have an accurate understanding of the reality of the world.
Mhm.
I think those would be the best. Do not expect any help within the environment that you're in. Do not expect any sort of help or support.
Mhm.
You're not gonna make. I take that back. I'm talking absolute here, but I will saying it strongly. The chance for you to make really, really good, lasting friends in these environments are non-existent.
Mhm. Mhm.
So have good friends, do a physical practice, do a good breathing practice, and hold the line.
And where can people, are you online anywhere people can find you? Do you have writing online or socials that you want to give or a
Yeah,
website?
www.mauricekaehler.com. That's my yoga healing site. Um, I do have two published ebooks online on Amazon, so just put in Maurice Kaehler, in the box. And I do personal writing, poetry, haiku, and some essays, and you could find me on Medium with that
Awesome.
stuff.
Well, I'll put links in the description for anybody to
Okay.
click on. Thanks so much, Maurice.
Thanks, Leslie. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you.
Okay.